Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are on ayah number 178 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Let us continue bihawdillahi wa quwwatih. قال الله تعالى: يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم القصاص في القتلى الحر بالحر والعبد بالعبد والأنثى بالأنثى فمن عفي له من أخيه شيء فاتباع بالمعروف وأداء إليه بإحسان ذلك تخفيف من ربكم ورحمة فمن اعتدى بعد ذلك فله عذاب أليم. Okay, so in this ayah it begins with the famous beginning, calling people of Iman. So it means what follows next is either an order or prohibition which will test your Iman. Iman is a key word, and we have spoken about this before. He says kutiba, it means written, but here it means ordained for you, because everything which is ordained is written in the book. Alaykum, upon you, so it is ordained upon you. Al-qisas, this is from the verb qassa yaqussu. Qassa means to follow something, as in the story of Musa alayhi salam. فَارْتَدَّ عَلَى آثَارِهِمَا قَصَصًا, they followed their footsteps back. So what's happening here is that the person who perpetrates a murder or an injury, he is followed and retaliated against. It's not like you just leave the matter as it is. So qisas means a like-for-like retaliation regarding life or limb, and the detail of that, with all its conditions and so on, are a matter of the fiqh books. But like we said before, Surah Al-Baqarah does deal with a few topics of fiqh, including this one, al-qisas. Fil qatla, qatla is the plural of qatil. Qatil is a person who is killed. Qatil is the killer. So the plural of qatil is qatla, meaning those who are killed. There are other such words of the same wazn or the same style, such as asra, plural of asir, which means a prisoner, or jarha, plural of jarih, which means a person who is injured. Then he says al-hur bil-hur, free for the free, meaning to say, if a free person murders another free person, then the murderer is to be retaliated against. And so of course we are talking about intentional killing. So this would be how many courts would describe as first-degree murder. And he says, well, abdu bil abd, the servant for the servant. So if one servant murders another servant, so that's intentional killing, then the killer or the murderer can be retaliated against in a life-for-life situation. Well, untha bil untha, the female for the female, likewise. He says, فَمَنْ عُفِيَ لَهُ, from afa ya'fu, to forgive and overlook. So he says, whoever is overlooked, meaning whoever is forgiven. That is to say, if the murderer is forgiven. So the one doing the forgiving will be the waliul maqtul, the family member or members of the deceased, the victim. Notice he says, min akhihi, from his brother. The akh, the brother being referred to, is the killed, the deceased, or the victim. So the killer is forgiven from having revenge taken against him for the murder of his brother, that is, brother in Iman. The word shay'un means in aught, if anything is forgiven, meaning even if one of the relatives of the deceased forgives the killer, then the retaliation cannot be taken. The word shay'un, which is marfu' bil dhamma, is the fa'il, or what we say na'ibu fa'il, of the verb ufiya, because ufiya is mabni lil majhul. So it could be read, linguistically at least, فَمَنْ عُفِيَ لَهُ شَيْءٌ مِنْ أَخِيهِ. But the word shay'un in this ayah comes afterwards, because the fa'il can be delayed till later. So if the killer is forgiven for the blood of his brother, then he says فَاتِّبَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Ittiba' meaning to follow, and ma'ruf meaning that which is known. So it is used for that which is known to be good in society. And ma'ruf is largely determined by the society as long as it does not contradict the text. So if a society decides that drinking a little bit of wine with your lunch is ma'ruf, then we say no, this is not ma'ruf because it contradicts the text. But if a society decides that obeying the highway code is ma'ruf, or when you're driving a car, giving way to the pedestrian, let's say, is ma'ruf, then indeed this is ma'ruf, even though there is no text in the Sharia talking about the highway code or driving a car. However, the text is at least not contradicted. So we can translate this that the blood money is to be sought after in a goodly manner. Okay, so what does that actually mean, a goodly manner? Well, it means that the inheritors of the deceased will seek the blood money without harming the murderer, because you'll always have the temptation to harm the murderer. After all, he did murder your near relative. He may have murdered your brother or your sister or one of your parents or your children. So the temptation may be there to either physically harm him or to verbally abuse him. But the Quran says no, none of this is allowed. If you opt for the blood money, take the blood money and that is it. You're not allowed anything more. And he says, وَأَدَاءٌ إِلَيْهِ بِإِحْسَانٍ. Ada means to fulfill something. So it means here that the blood money should be paid with ihsan. So this refers to the murderer. The murderer needs to pay the blood money with ihsan. Ihsan meaning doing good. Okay, so how does that happen? Well, it means that he pays the blood money in full and he does not procrastinate. He pays it at the due date. If he has to pay in installments, he will pay at the due date without procrastination. It says, ذَلِكَ تَخْفِيفٌ. Takhfif, to lighten something. Khafif means light as opposed to heavy. This is a lightening from your Rabb and it is a rahmah. So we talked about rahmah. It is kullu khair wa ni'mah. Okay, so what does that refer to? Well, amongst the Yahud in their law of the Dawrah, the only reaction you could have against a murderer is either to forgive the murderer or to take a retaliation life for life. There is no blood money. And what we also find in the tafsir is that amongst the Christians it was just blood money and no retaliation. But in this deen, the deen of balance and perfection, you have a choice between blood money and retaliation. In fact, there is also a third choice, which is simply to forgive. That has always been the case, even in the previous shara'i as well. Then he says, فَمَنِ اعْتَدَى بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ. Then whoever makes i'tida, transgression, after that. Now what this refers to is that if the awliya, the relatives and the inheritors of the deceased, take the blood money and then after that try to kill the murderer or harm the murderer, then this is i'tida, when you cross the line and transgress. So these people, if they did that, will have a painful torment from Allah Jalla wa Ala. Okay, so reflecting on this ayah, what can we pick up? Well, we notice Allah Jalla wa Ala calling upon the believers with the best description, O you who believe. And we have mentioned this before. We pick up that qisas, punishment, is from this deen, and we are not allowed to rebel against such a command. And any people who do not implement this ruling either have no iman or deficient iman. We find that a free person is killed for a free. The ayah would suggest that this is general, any free for any free. However, there are certain exceptions. A Muslim is not killed for a kafir, and there is some difference of opinion as to whether a father is killed for killing his child. The discussion on that is for the books of fiqh. And the same thing for a servant with a servant and female for a female. The ayah is general. And on this matter comes a point of fiqhi dispute. Can a man be killed for murdering a woman? And can a free person be killed for murdering a servant? As for the man being killed for murdering a woman, then the matter is slightly easier to resolve. We have the authentic hadith about a Yahudi man killing a young girl using rocks. He smashed her head between two rocks, and she, before her death, identified the person, and the Prophet carried out a likewise punishment, meaning smashing his head between two rocks. He killed her because she had some pearls that he wanted to take from her. Now this is a qisas punishment because it is a like-for-like punishment. The Prophet killed the man just as the man killed the victim. And this is qisas. You kill the person in the same way they murdered their victim as long as you are able to do so. If this punishment had been an ordinary punishment, then you would have just decapitated him with the sword. Or you would use the easiest method to execute the person. So in this ayah, when it says al-untha bil-untha, the mafhumul mukhalafa, the antithesis of this ayah, would suggest that a male is not killed for a female. However, in the authentic hadith, we have a direct evidence which suggests that the male can be killed for a female. Okay, what about the free person being killed for a servant? The majority opinion is that the free is not killed for a servant. And the reason is, firstly, this ayah, they say hur bil hur, free for a free, which means a free is not killed for a servant. This is the antithesis or the mafhumul mukhalafa of this ayah. And they also use analogy and rationale. They say that the servant is a property to be valued. That's why the servant does not have blood money. His blood money will simply be his value. So he's not treated like a normal person, as in a free person. If somebody chopped off a hand of a servant, there would not be a normal blood money for one hand. Rather, it would be a fraction of his value. So likewise then, in the case of a life, we do not treat the servant as a normal person. Rather, we treat the servant as a property whose value needs to be given for damages. For example, if you destroy somebody's car, you need to pay for the damages. And so likewise for the servant. However, the weightier opinion on this matter is likely to be the minority opinion. This is the opinion which we favor, which says that a free person is killed for a servant. We have textual evidence and we can rationalize it as well. Allah Jalla wa Ala in Surah Al-Ma'idah says, وَكَتَبْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ أَنَّ النَّفْسَ بِالنَّفْسِ. We ordained for them, meaning the Banu Israel, that you will have a life for a life. And the servant is a life. A servant is not a car, it's not a property. The majority will answer back by saying, yes, life for a life, that is general, but this ayah of Baqarah makes an exception. The problem with this exception is that the exception is being made by a mafhumul mukhalafa. So herein lies the question, can a mafhumul mukhalafa, the antithesis of an ayah, make an exception to the mantuq of a second evidence? So you see, when he says an-nafsu bin-nafs, the mantuq, that which is directly spoken, is a soul for a soul. Any soul for any soul, free, servant, parent, child, male, female, it does not matter. It is general, a soul for a soul, full stop. The ayah of Baqarah does not, in its mantuq, in its direct spoken message, tell us that the free is not killed for a servant. Rather, it tells us by way of mafhumul mukhalafa, by the antithesis. So we have a clash between a mantuq and a mafhum. The question is, can a mafhumul mukhalafa make an exception to the mantuq? And herein, even the usuliyun may disagree. But it appears that in such a case, the mafhumul mukhalafa should not make an exception to the mantuq. Because mantuq is direct, mafhumul mukhalafa is not direct. And we do not have as much certainty with a mafhumul mukhalafa. With a mantuq, however, it gives us a higher level of certainty. And so when such a clash happens, we take that which is on a stronger level of certainty, which is the mantuq. So what we give precedence to is soul for a soul, whatever that soul may be. unless you have direct evidence otherwise. Such as, for example, we have direct evidence that a Muslim is not killed for a kafir. We have that in the authentic hadith. You see, that is not mafhum al-mukhalafa, that is a mantuq, a direct evidence. Meaning the ruling comes from the actual spoken words themselves. It does not come from the antithesis. Also, we have in the authentic hadith, the Prophet ﷺ saying, Al-mu'minuna tatakafa'u dima'uhum. The mu'minun, their blood is equal. So this servant who was murdered, is he a mu'min? If the answer is yes, the hadith tells us that his blood is equal to any other mu'min. King, queen, prince, pauper, whatever. As for their saying that the servant is property, so that there is no blood money for a servant, nor therefore qisas, we say there is a clear difference between financial issues and issues of blood and life. So when it comes to financial issues, then yes, he is a servant and he has no blood money. Rather, his quote-unquote blood money is his value. But this is a financial matter. When we talk about a life matter, then the equation changes. The servant is now treated as a normal human being. So the servant is like a hybrid type of a person, much like these hybrid cars that you have, part petrol and part electric. So the ruling of the servant can change. It does not remain constant. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a hybrid type of a situation. For example, if you chop off someone's hand, the normal blood money is half of the blood money of life. So the blood money of life is 100 camels. So chopping off one hand would be 50 camels. However, if a person steals with that very same hand, his hand can be cut off if he steals something worth 1/4 of a dinar or more. Now, 1/4 of a dinar is way less than 50 camels. So why the discrepancy? And the answer is, one is a financial matter and the other one is a matter of blood and limb. And there can be no analogy between the two. It's like they're two different ball games. And so we say a similar thing here with the servant. One is a matter of life and the other one is a financial matter. We also take that this whole qisas with the option of blood money is a rahmah, as the ayah mentions. How so? Well, first of all, the blood money would be a rahmah for the murderer because he has his life spared, and it will also be a rahmah for the awliya of the deceased, because it could be that they do not wish for qisas. Maybe they are poor and they could do with the money instead. So this is better for them. Imagine if they were forced to either retaliate or forgive. Neither of these two options would particularly benefit them in their state. So giving the awliya options is always better than not giving them options. We also take from this ayah that this sharia is superior to the previous shara'i'. We can also take that if any one of the awliya forgives the murderer, then the qisas cannot go ahead, even if the other awliya want the qisas. How do we take this? Because of the word shay'un. It is nakira. Nakira without the alif and lam denotes itlaq, which is without any restrictions. So that is to say, if he is forgiven in aught, then the qisas cannot go ahead. So even if one person forgives him, then the qisas cannot go ahead. Blood money, yes, but not qisas. We also take from this that anyone who commits a major sin is not a kafir. How do we take this? Look at the word akhihi, his brother. This refers to the one who was killed. So Allah Jalla wa Ala is saying that the murderer and the murdered are brothers. And yet, intentional murder is absolutely the greatest of the major sins that you can commit after shirk. It is the first sin about which judgment will be carried out on Yawm al-Qiyamah. It is the matter of blood. No other major sin is going to be quite as major as first-degree murder. and yet they are brothers. So it means that the murderer is still a Muslim. And this is in contradiction to the Khawarij and their types who say that the one who commits major sin is a kafir. The Mu'tazila say that the major sinner is neither a Muslim nor a kafir. He is in a state of limbo in between. And all of this is nonsense. We find that in matters of qisas and blood money, professionalism and cordiality must be observed. So you seek the blood money bil ma'ruf, we spoke about that, and you pay the blood money bi ihsan, and we spoke about that. We also find that no transgression must take place in these matters. So you do not harm the murderer if he pays you the blood money. So no transgression is allowed from any party whatsoever in whatever way. And let us take ayah number 179. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. And for you in the qisas there is hayatun, life. Ya ulil albab, O people of albab, plural of lub, meaning understanding. But it is an intelligence and intellect with no desire, just pure cold hard rationale. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. لَعَلَّ means so in order, so it's a ta'leel, a justification. تَتَّقُونَ means to be aware and to protect yourself. So be aware of what? Of murder. So that is to say, the qisas is in place so that you are wary that if you commit murder, you would be liable for execution. Okay, let's reflect on this ayah. This ayah, though it is short, it is extremely rich in its balagha, in its eloquence, and in its deep meaning. In qisas, we would take life for a life, and yet this ayah is saying that it gives you life. Yet in qisas, we are taking life. And the ulama have mentioned that this ayah explains something in a way which does seem paradoxical at first. How can taking life be giving life? And the answer is that once it becomes known in a society that murder would result in your life being taken, then this will allow people to acquire taqwa, or to be wary of killing others. Once this happens in a society, then you will not find anyone murdering anyone else. And so therefore you will find more life being saved in society. Now there was a saying amongst the Arab who said, Al-Qatl anfa lil-Qatl. Killing is the best preventative measure for killing. But here comes this ayah and adjusts that particular saying of theirs, that killing prevents other killing. This ayah is more profound than the saying of the Arab, because this ayah mentions qisas. The saying of the Arab, al-qatl anfa lil-qatl, does not mention qisas. It merely mentions killing. So they are saying, meaning the Arab, that killing prevents other killing. This ayah is saying, no, it's not killing which prevents killing, it's qisas which prevents killing. Because qisas, by definition, is just killing, meaning killing a person with due justice. Whereas with the saying of the Arab, it could refer to any type of killing, even unjust killing. If we were to correct the statement of the Arab, we would say, Al-qatlu qisasan anfa lil-qatli zulman. Killing somebody as qisas, meaning killing the murderer, is the best preventative factor against a murder out of oppression or unjust killing. That would be the correct way of saying it. However, this ayah does not put it like this because it does not want to repeat the word qatl. So it says, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. It uses the word life, which is a more positive word than using the word qatl. And it uses the word qisas, which inherently denotes justice. The word qatl, killing, does not inherently denote justice. Why? Because you could kill with due right and without due right. You could, for example, in the Jahiliyyah times, kill somebody who is not the murderer. And you could do this as a deterrent against unjust murder. But the problem is you're killing somebody who is innocent. And you're using that as a deterrent. Clearly, you can see that is oppression and unjust. It is not qisas, is it? When you kill other than the killer, which was a practice amongst the Jahiliyyah. Notice he also says, Ya ulil albab, so we take that only the people of proper intellect will understand the wisdom of the qisas. If you look to the laws in the kuffar countries, we find that the one who commits first-degree murder is maybe given a life sentence, and even then, he's likely to be let out after 10 or 15 years. It's all complete nonsense. First of all, being put in prison, even if you do it for life, who is going to pay for this? Yes, it's the innocent taxpayers who are paying. So he commits the murder, and the taxpayers pay for his upkeep. It's completely ridiculous. Secondly, it is oppression. How is it that the murderer who committed first-degree murder is being judged by the judge of a court? Were the relatives of the judge murdered? No. So what right does the judge have to pronounce a verdict? The verdict should be pronounced by the relatives of the deceased. After all, they are the ones who are bearing the impact of this murder. The judge and the court is not in a state of mourning. It is the relatives who are. So the matter should be handed over to the relatives, not to the judge. So the fact that the court takes control of the matter is an oppression to the relatives. So the relatives are being oppressed twice. One from the murderer and the other one from the court case. Go figure. Wallahu a'lam.